Testing 1, 2, 3. Hey everybody, if you're here, I would love to see some thumbs up in here. Let me know if everything's coming clue. Let me know if everything is coming through clearly. Por favor. And you know the drill, we'll get started here before too awful long. What up? It's working. All right, let's put this into performance mode so that you can actually, so that it doesn't stop working halfway through. How about that? 2 thumbs up. All right, that means you're getting everything through and clear, and we'll be good to go before too awful long. So glad. Hi, all you people. And thanks for coming back for a second week in a row. I had a good time last Friday and wanted to share something else with everybody if that is permissible. Apparently it is permissible. It says I've got an excellent connection, so that's great. Seth, what up? Nate, Dominique, Doramu, Jennifer, I'm probably ruining everything. Laura, RMF5143, Sean, Weston, Sarah. I'm doing okay, I'm answering now Doramu's question. How are you doing today? I'm doing okay. I've been doing lots of yard work during quarantine. And while that's been nice in theory, I feel like an old man. I've wrecked my body. I had to go to urgent care earlier because I got this crazy infection from a cut on my hand, and then I've got tendinitis and all kinds of things. And but we're making it through. All that to say, things are going to be all right, Could be a lot worse. Hey, Melanie. Hey, Sydney. You know what? Alrighty, O'Reilly. My wife did get those. We did get some veggie burgers, but not last Friday. We got pizza instead because both of us just thought, I don't want to deal with having to cook these things right now. So, thanks, John. Oh, wow. Comrade Wonky, that's big news. PJ and Danielle from Pensacola. What's that Manchester Orchestra song about Pensacola? Santa alcohol, Pensacola, Florida bars. Yes. All right, we'll give it a couple more minutes like we did last week to allow the folks who want to be in here to get in here. Yeah, the yard does look great. Josh, no, but I told her that she was in charge of dinner. So, that's something. So, yeah, I'll give it a couple more minutes and then I'll kind of introduce everything. My epic, OMG, the epicenter boys are in the house. Oh, I'm sure Robot Levi will hop in here sooner or later to let y'all know how much he appreciates donations. Oh, Robot Levi, what a guy. I'm so glad I don't have to be that guy. Hi from Phoenix. Hi from Albuquerque, Laura. Oh, shut your mouth, my epic. OMG. So, since my epic is on here, I should let everybody else who's on here know that those guys just launched a Patreon and a Discord server, and it rules. I love Discord, and those of you who are here from my Fraction Club know that, and I use it all the time. But yeah, they launched one. I had a long chat with them, tried to convince them, and so they're giving it a shot. So if it fails miserably, you can blame it on me. But yeah, check that out. They're on Patreon now. My Epic. What a great band, you know? What a band. What a band. Hey, Daniel. How's Winnipeg? How's Winnipeg treating you right now? Robot Levi is popular on Discord, although on Discord he's called Helpful Bot Boy. I at least made enough of a distinction between us on Discord to I don't know, have him seem like a different entity. FJ, thank you. Thank you. You know that was 8 years ago. It's 8 years we can't get back together. So, there's that. What up, Noah? Well, guys, you can get the shirt that I'm wearing from To Write Love on Her Arms. And actually, one of the things that Mr. Robot Boy Levi is doing in your live chat is telling you all about that. So, this essay, which I can talk about now. Yeah, let me just intro this. Well, first of all, to answer your question, it's a To Write Love on Her Arms shirt. And Robot Levi will be telling you what the link is to that throughout this stream. So let me just kind of preface this this essay and tell you guys about it. I don't know that I did as great a job of promoting this thing as I did the Correspondence of Fiction performance for last week, but that's totally fine. I'll just keep it listed and everybody here can hang, and that's that. I wrote this essay, which is titled You Make Today Better, in the fall of last year. My original intent was to write it for To Write Love on Her Arms, who was prepping for their National Suicide Prevention Day campaign at the same time and by the same title. So for all intents and purposes, this is not an original title for an essay, and it's entirely theirs. But the more I wrote, the longer the thing got, and the further removed from the crux of what the To Write Love on Her Arms campaign was about, and so I held off on the submission. Those of you who are here and who have followed my work for any significant amount of time knows that To Write Love on Her Arms has been a huge part of my journey as an artist. And I did a podcast with them earlier on today that'll be out before too awful long. So I'm excited about that. But when it came to this ended up being a lot more personal, self-reflective, maybe even a lot less artsy. You know, for the folks who are here who are expecting like poetry right now, this is a lot more, I think, personal than it is creative. But I didn't want to trash the thing, even though I didn't end up using it for its original intent. So I made this public at the start of quarantine. Actually, I put up this essay along with a digital download that would be available to anyone who wanted it, as a sort of, here, have this while we're all isolated. You still make today better, even when you're not seeing other folks very much. And then I started getting a lot of emails about how the download link wasn't working and the audio stream wasn't playing. And so I just thought, man, I'm going to do this as a live thing, and the folks who want to have it this way can have it this way. That said, I don't know who here is a fan of Brené Brown, but I'm a huge fan of Brené Brown. She has a lot of wonderful books, one of them called Daring Greatly. And in the book, she talks about how you can be vulnerable, and then you can sort of spotlight people and blind them with your bright, vulnerable spotlight, and how the latter is probably not as appropriate as the former. And I will admit that reading this live right now has given me some anxiety that recording it and putting it out and not having to deal with people's immediate reactions didn't. And so I don't know what kind of line I am towing with this, but I think that throughout the course of this next 45 minutes or so, it will be somewhat self-explanatory, and hopefully it will be something that is more helpful than squirmy, if that makes sense. I have never been one to try to sugarcoat things that I'm going through, and art and Levi the Poet has always sort of been my means of expressing somewhat of a chronological timeline of my own life, and interspersed throughout that are fictitious stories and poems and things that have nothing to do with who I am. But I do continue to write from that very personal place as well, and this is certainly that. So I'll let it speak for itself. In my promotion for this, I sort of described it as an essay that dealt with life and with death and with trauma and with childhood attachment theory and with emotional health and spiritual abuse. And there are a lot of, I although I'm not the hugest fan of the word deconstruction, certainly that is a part of it, but also so is reconstruction. And so I hope that it is as helpful as it can be. And I appreciate you for hanging out with me. And the last thing that I would like to say is that there's a friend of mine that I have named Atlas. And I would just like to say, Atlas, if you are tuning in right now, then this is for you, because I believe that you make today better. So I'm going to read this, and that will last a while, and then I will hang out on here for a little while, and we can go back and forth like we did last week. I appreciate you very much. Who of us has not asked, who am I? Who am I really? What am I all about? Is there any essential me here? It is as if we are all a big secret to ourselves and must search for clues, however obscure they may be. Yet the search never stops fascinating us, even as we grow older, and if it does, we have almost certainly stopped growing. This curiosity about ourselves grows more intense in the teen and young adult years as we try on a dozen costumes and roles, and we surely covet any recognition or praise of our most recent incarnation. We quickly grab it and try it on for size, as if to say, this might be me. Some never take their costume off. A too early or too successful self becomes a total life agenda, occasionally for good, but often for ill. Think of the many young athletes, musicians, and poets who become obsessed with their identity and never make it to the big time. Even if they do succeed, there are too many stories of unhappiness, being lost, and self-destruction. Our ongoing curiosity about our true self seems to lessen if we settle into any successful role. We have then allowed others to define us from the outside, although we do not realize it. Or perhaps we dress ourselves up on the outside and never get back inside. This confession about our true self and false self is much of the illusion of the first half of life, although most of us do not experience the problem then. Only later in life can we perhaps join with Thomas Merton, who penned one of my favorite lines: "If I had a message to my contemporaries, it is surely this. Be anything you like. Be madmen, drunks, and bastards of every shape and form, but at all costs, avoid one thing: success. If you are too obsessed with success, your life has probably been wasted." I received a t-shirt as a part of To Write Love on Her Arm's 2019 World Suicide Prevention Day campaign. And the front says, "You make today better." Something about me: when I am gifted with a new piece of clothing, I wear it nonstop. My friends and family have always laughed at this. Everyone knows when I have acquired something new because I wear whatever it is every day for weeks. Last week, after working out in my new To Write Love on Her Arm shirt, I told my wife, Brandy, that I felt like I was in a bit of a conundrum because all I wanted to wear for our dinner party afterward was my new To Write Love on Her Arms shirt. So, I took a shower and put it back on. The shirt came with a bracelet and a sheet of branded cardstock. On one side were instructions on how I might be able to help garner awareness for this year's fundraiser. The other side is a blank page, save a short writing prompt at the top: "I make today better," with an ellipses attached to it, and it was my job to fill in the blank space and show the world why I make today better. That evening, as I brushed my teeth and stared at myself in my new favorite shirt in the mirror, it occurred to me that before I would be able to show the world why or how, I must first believe that I do. Which begged the question, do I? I've been listening to a podcast called You Are a Storyteller. The hosts, Jesse Bryan and Brian McDonald, say this: "If it scares you a little bit because you think that you're telling some deep truth about yourself, then you should probably write it down. If it doesn't scare you, you haven't found it. Otherwise, it's just on the surface. It is just on the surface if it doesn't scare you a little bit to put it down." So, I am putting it down. After all of these years, after every kind email and comment and message and YouTube stream from the public, every bit of love given from my family and friends in private, I still sometimes struggle to believe that I make today better. Until this year, I don't think that I've had the language to articulate why, but I'm sharing it now because I have chosen to believe that my story does, in fact, make a difference. I will, in fact, make today better. And perhaps someone who hears this page, this stream, will be able to relate. Surely, if I am to believe myself and the rest of you who have echoed it back throughout the years, I am not alone in my experiences. I heard a quote that says this: "Hopelessness is the root of anxiety, mental illness, and depression. It is the source of all misery and the cause of all addiction. Chronic anxiety is a crisis of hope. It is the fear of a failed future, Depression is a crisis of hope. It is the belief in a meaningless future. Though that definition might be reductionistic, there is something that I found profound in it. In all of my mental back and forth throughout the years, hope, often found in our not aloneness, has been the drum that I have beat more than any other. In my story, which I am choosing to believe is important, I know exactly the days when I first experienced the loss of hope as depression and the loss of hope as anxiety. And they both involved the death of God. The first was in high school. I had just come home from Asia, where my dad introduced me to men and women whose lives and families had been forfeit on behalf of the faith that they professed. I returned so disillusioned that one night before bed, I told my mom that I felt as though my life had been reduced to graduating for a piece of paper that I could then turn in for more pieces of paper that I could then turn in for a television set to watch until I died. Depression. The second was in November of 2012, when, in my uncle's hot tub in Santa Barbara, California, I began to shake as if from cold. You'd think a hot tub in paradise would inspire some feeling of transcendence over and above the feeling that God had left me, but it was the first time I experienced the anxiety that has haunted me since. What are the roots of this hopelessness? I've discovered at least 3 specific points on my map: spiritual abuse, childhood attachments to negative parental patterns, and emotional unhealth. I've listed them in the order that I discovered them in myself, and also in the order that their presence in my consciousness has lent itself toward healing. When my therapist first said the words spiritual abuse at the start of the years I've spent in therapy following the collapse of my church, it was as though a dam had broken. Someone finally said it. I didn't know how. All I knew is that everything right somehow became everything wrong, and that I, and the majority of my closest friends and community, had fallen apart. My counselor said the words with a kind of nonchalant compassion. Nonchalant because it was crystal clear to him. Compassionate because he could see my pain, and, whether through the maturity of age or experiential resonance, he wept with me over my loss of sight. I wish that I could have stopped hearing my pastor's voice screaming, "God hates you," so much sooner than I did. But it played like an endless feedback loop for years inside of my mind. Or the farewells given to question askers whose fear is so instilled in a bunch of kids who would inevitably stop worshiping celebrities and start trying to be still and know that God is God. Let it be known, there are a lot of questions in the stillness. Every time I had the audacity to ask a why, I heard the same farewell and wondered whether I'd burn in hell forever the way that my dad thought he would when I had to take the guns out of my parents' house before he resorted to razors instead. Which brings me to attachment therapy and the way that I understand myself in light of my parents. This has helped me understand the why behind the who I am. When I had to answer whether or not I'd experienced the kinds of emotions I was feeling inside as a child, it was like someone had set dynamite at the foot of a dam, and the whole wall fell apart. Yes, I thought. I am living in the prison of past experiences, a volatile life with my biological dad, a rage-infused life with my spiritual dad. How do I appease them? How do I keep them happy? How do I make sure that they don't feel like failures? How do I make sure that I don't fail them? I used to say that I didn't think much of my view of my parents had rubbed off on my view of God. But what a lack of self-awareness. Every day has been filled with attempts to appease him and everyone else. An entire fan base that I somehow feel spiritually indebted to, as though I am the one responsible for their salvation. And then when it comes to God himself, how do I keep him from being angry with me? How do I keep myself secure? How do I know I won't go to hell? How do I know he won't send me there? How can I convince myself he won't send my friends there? How do I know I believe enough of the right stuff for him to let me in? How do I know that my doubts won't condemn me? How can I be sure? How can I keep the spool from unraveling more like... How can I possibly admit that it already has? Surely, speaking that truth out loud will condemn me. My friend Heidi articulated the dilemma as well as anyone I know has been able to, and I have paid her analogy forward time and time again. When you're young, she said, you're handed a package called gospel. This package includes Jesus, but it also includes prescriptives. What the outworking of your faith in him must look like according to each person's respective upbringing. And of course it does for a while, until you grow up and experience the world and form your own opinions and develop your own convictions. At that point, the package you were handed begins to unravel, and because Jesus has never been separate from any of the additives he came with, any loss of the peripherals begins to feel like a loss of everything, including your Savior. But however painful the process, it seems the truth really does set you free. I am not waking up in the morning, unable to keep the fear from flooding into my chest and overtaking my entire body, second-guessing every single thought, word, action, or interaction I had the day before, consumed with a vague guilt and condemnation over potential offenses I may have caused another person or my God. And neither has my love for Jesus faded, which surprised me. As it turns out, God has not been as vindictive or reactionary or vengeful or unhealthy or narcissistic as other fathers I've known. I have been filled with hope instead of fear, and compassion instead of judgment, and longing instead of indifference. And I wonder, is this a glimpse of what the kingdom is now means? Is this the kind of experience that a lot of people get to have, and I just never knew because it's never been my normal? A while ago, one of my high school best friends, Seth, called me to tell me that he missed the happy, bubbly Levi. He said somewhere along the way that person disappeared, and he wanted to see his old friend again. I remember one day standing in Rowan's living room in New Zealand and thinking to myself, when I go home, I don't want to be embarrassed by being excited. I just want to be in the moment that I'm in. And if I'm crying, then I'm crying. But if I'm stoked, then I am going to be stoked and not suppress my emotions and feelings for anyone. It's good to be happy. And if I'm overjoyed, then I want to feel it. Which brings me to emotional health. The other day, Propaganda shared a thought that has stuck in mine. He said, sometimes I wonder if anybody's emotions matured past 8th grade. Years ago, Chris Lazo introduced me to a book by Peter Scazzero titled Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. It was my first introduction to a more contemplative faith tradition, and ever since then, emotional health has been a recurring theme in my life, and acknowledging the prior two bullet points, spiritual abuse and childhood imprints, has helped me grow beyond 8th grade. I recently read a book in which the author has much to say about moving out of the head and into the body. Much of my own therapy has consisted of getting out of my intellect and into a more holistic way of living in this world and in my own body. I can get trapped in my head. When I started therapy, I had no idea how to tell my facilitator what I was feeling. All I had were arguments, devil's advocations for how one might hypothetically feel, depending, but no clue and no language whatsoever to describe what was happening in me. For all I knew, nothing was happening in me, save what Handel calls the inhibitory emotions of anxiety, depression, and shame. Life is nothing more than constant analysis, I answered him. And he responded, understandably, with sadness. So when I hear someone like Handel say that not feeling your sadness is a factor that leads toward depression, something clicks. I have to feel something. We have to feel. It is commonplace, at least it has been in my life, to hear cute sayings such as faith trumps feeling. There's an aspect of that statement that I wholeheartedly agree with. And personally, I continue to affirm the objectivity of a capital T truth found in a person named Jesus that provides hope beyond the fleetingness of my emotion. But by and large, I have a deepening conviction that we have done ourselves a great disservice by dismissing emotion and feeling altogether. Sad? Are you sad? I'll take this pill. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Angry? Oh, well, heed this warning. Make sure you don't sin in your anger. And these are far too often described as synonymous. Aroused? Well, let's see what our misinterpreted pal Onan has to say about asceticism and how hateful your body is. Anxious? Let's double down on it. Just don't be, because the Bible says so. It is what happens when you lob truth like bombs instead of presence like a salve. Or, because the point of this is not, please hear me, not to vilify anyone, it is what happens when a young man like me puts his idols on too high a pedestal and defers to men for direction instead of spirit. Stop feeling this way isn't helpful. We have truisms and platitudes to slap on like Band-Aids, but empathy? Not often. What a miracle the incarnation of our suffering, sympathetic servant Savior is. Let alone that Spirit would dwell that way in us. It seems trendy to depart from evangelicalism. I hardly know what that word means anymore beyond a political slur, or why it's treated as though it's the only acceptable name for people in the family of God. I do know that the word isn't synonymous with evangelism in the same way that the word Christian isn't the same as Christendom. There is a rising movement of ex-evangelicals, but it feels to me as vitriolic as what it has left behind. Fundamentalism standing on its head, every bit as punitive as what it has abandoned. All my life, I've heard that we can go to the Lord in prayer with anything, but the way that we act toward one another screams, but you sure as hell cannot come to us. What a foolish thing for God to do indeed, calling fearmongers like us his hands and feet. I'm tired of writing about fear and shame insofar as it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I've been off the road for a long time this year, largely because I didn't know how to work through so much of what I'm trying to describe, anyway, in healthy ways. I didn't know how to assert myself or how to own my experience. I only knew how to bury myself and distract myself from the fact that I was doing it constantly by being on the road, working, forever on, and forever afraid of being me in hopes that I might please you, whoever the general you happens to be. This has been a different and uncomfortable year for me. I also know that it has been necessary. I have not been home for a full consecutive 9 months. Yeah, it's going on 13, 14 now. In 10 years. That is my entire adult life. This is the first year in my adult life that I have felt in my body, which I am slowly learning not to hate, the seasons change in one place. I was on a walk with my dog yesterday, feeling the cool of the evening's air begin to transition from the hell heat of July into September's breeze. I wondered at the way the sunset looked different than it did 4 months ago. I thought about the way that I was able to be home for my mom and sister's birthday this year, and the way that I recorded a voice memo for myself that night, as I love to do, after dropping off their gifts, about how grateful I was for it. I've gotten to see my nephews more than I've ever been able to, which still might not be enough, but it has been at least more. I've had to sit with an honest look at myself, void of distraction, void of the next tour date on a calendar addicted to doing. I've had to be. It's been ugly, and it's been beautiful, and it's hard, and from what I am able to tell, it has been a must, and it will be worth it. And 9 months into this necessity is a growing burning in my chest that I must write it out. I'm a people pleaser through and through. It's an addiction that needs to be broken in me. And I feel very little fear before my King. It has got to be written vulnerably, but I am done with exacerbating self-pity. It has got to be written relatable, but it has got to come from a heart that is no longer attempting to facilitate codependent relationships, adoration, or the approval of every reader or listener who stumbles upon this page. I think the emotional healing is what continues to strike me as most significant, perhaps because of the way that giving myself permission to feel has allowed me to both uncover and release pain that I never knew existed. It is also in this kind of self-acceptance that I have been able to believe things like, I make today better, because it is in that self and God-given love that I am able to believe that my existence has as much worth as I am constantly telling others that they have, as human beings, rather than human doings. which is not my phrase. Thank you, Roar. I think that's why I opened this whole thing with the Merton quote about success. I have attached far too much worth to whatever amorphous meaning that word holds. We are most judgmental of others about the trait visible in them that we don't like in ourselves. And I will tell you this much. It is extremely easy to love others as you love yourself if you don't. We are the most emphatic about offering to others as well what we struggle to receive ourselves. I've often felt like I have to prove something more to be loved. More theological or philosophical or sociological correctness. More tribal here-ness, more work and more writing and more projects and more money and more emails and more tour dates and more time and more of fill in the blank with whatever word you so choose. More is an addiction, regardless of whether you're actually acquiring whatever it is that you want. You're either focused on getting it or focused on the fact that you're not, and either way, it's not a great focal point. Art and hope and beauty and people and gospel are still worth suffering for. But I am, admittedly, trying for less. Trying for simple, for let die and let pass much of what is in me that inevitably creates suffering for others, particularly those closest to my heart. Part of that has meant honestly examining my beliefs, the narratives that I tell myself, and more so, the fruit growing on my tree. There has been a lot of pruning to do. Deconstruction is a word that I've never been excited about. It got too sellable too quickly, too hive-minded, too weaponized. That said, my own wrestling with faith hasn't ever been the equivalent of a loss or absence of it. Whatever I think of the word, deconstruction defined as absence or loss or an intentional farewell to faith seems highly unfair to me. I wrote a record about my experience. I think that the bleeding eyeball scared more people than I thought that it would, but some folks took the time to pay attention. After it dropped, I received an astonishingly thoughtful critique from an acquaintance of mine who is now pastoring a theologically reformed church in Kansas City, Missouri. To this day, his was the most in-depth and respectful review of anything that I have ever put out, and I have nothing but respect to reciprocate. He did ask me a question, however, that has nagged at me since, and it was something akin to, have you left us? Have we lost another one? Are you still wanting to be a part of this conversation with us? In a way, I think that the question hurts my heart. Because all I want is to be a part of the family of God. I'm in a place where I think that that family is bigger than I used to. But I don't know why that would make me want to stop speaking that name. Sometimes people act as though when a person re-examines her theological preconceptions, it means that they've rejected Jesus too, or the crux of the thing. For me, Jesus. I'm still very much about that supremacy. So, based upon experience and witness, I responded truthfully, with a little bit of pushback, I love you, and us, and this ongoing conversation. I want to be a part of it all. I just think they might be more a part of it too. I want to keep talking and growing together, but with all due respect, my experience is that question askers are treated as potential threats in this world, and I would simply return yours. Will you still have me, or will you cast me out as lost? Will you still allow me to be a part of your conversations? There have been a lot of people publicly denouncing their faith on the internet lately. This is not that for me. Not even close. My desire for unity is not the same as an abandonment of my faith in the Jesus who I hope might make it so. If anything, it has strengthened my resolve to love God and neighbor well. It is simply to say that experience and perspective with people just like me in this world, yes, but also with my risen Savior and my encounters with his character have left me dissatisfied with and confused by the God of fences. And there are as many fences among the infighters as there are between the outsiders. When my dad died, there were people at his funeral who wouldn't have been caught dead in a room together were it not for his death. I took the opportunity to tell them so. I so long for unity among the body of Christ, beautiful bride that she has been called. I've learned a lot this year alone about some of the negative traits that I inherited from my dad, but this is, I believe, one of the most beautiful gifts he ever gave me. I long for it. And when I encounter the beautiful Maori, or the hardcore kid kicking and screaming his way to freedom, or my grandmother sending me Republican candidate speeches, or some internet troll who starts lashing out against her without knowing she's my grandma, and I'll straight up dive through the internet to punch that dude square in the jaw on her behalf, I wonder what Augustine meant when he said that the church is precisely the state of communion with the whole world. I think my dad would have seen his death as worth it if those people would have actually taken the opportunity to repent and forgive and love and reconcile with one another. Part of my growing process has meant admitting to and shedding some of my Messiah complex. I can't be anyone's savior. I can still point to the Savior I still believe in, but I can't sit in that seat. I love the Lord, I think. I think I at least love the idea of loving the Lord. If I'm honest, I also fear people's rebuttals of, you love your idea of the Lord. Well, first of all, so do you. But that fear has kept me paralyzed and ashamed for too long. I don't want to live here anymore. I literally cannot live here anymore. I have grown tired of shame and fear. They got me nowhere. I want to tell the truth. So part of me is dying, or at least growing. When I was out on tour with My Epic last year, Aaron talked each night about how so much of this process feels like death, when in fact we may look back on it as simply growing pains. Perhaps there's something synonymous. In his book, Christianity Rediscovered, Vincent J. Donovan describes his experience with doubt among the Maasai tribe in Africa. He writes, I can sympathize and feel with young Americans whom I have met who are going through the agony of unbelief. I used to think that faith was a head trip, a kind of intellectual assent to the truths and doctrines of our religion. I know better now. When my faith began to be shattered, I did not hurt in my head. I hurt all over. Yes. This necessary dying is more than an assent to an idea. It is real and difficult and painful. But faith, in my experience, does not stay shattered. I have lived my life before this audience in real time, trying my best to, as I have said in poems past, shout transparency. Jesus says that the truth will set you free. And for most of my life, I've read those words and the rest of Scripture with next to no here and now significance. Only big, objective, futuristic, ethereal, dispensationalist, eternal life insurance truth. Perhaps it is that. But if the kingdom of heaven is not also now, then what is the point? It has got to be right now. Perhaps much of the reason that Christianity has become so ugly is because we aren't able to remember that it is finished and the kingdom is here. We decided to dominate instead of cultivate. We decided to use whatever is in our power to make subject to, rather than to do all that we can to live peaceably with all people. I want to be an active participant in the here and now, even if it is not quite the not yet. And I will trip all over the place. In attempts at getting better at being me, I have made plenty of mistakes. I'd rather live and repent when necessary than continue to not live at all. I've always been able to extend mercy outward. It is the inward acceptance of it that I struggle to swallow. Here again is an example of the way that I have preached to others what I long to accept myself. But I am starting. I don't know how to create art that isn't honest. I don't know how to be something other than myself. I have tried not to die for years, and it has only led to a worse kind of death. Paralysis. Nothingness, nowhereness. I've experienced enough at this point in my life to be able to connect the dots between authenticity and honesty, and freedom from the depression and anxiety that I have struggled with and medicated and self-medicated for years. Truth has been, by and large, the alleviator. I can't ignore it anymore. And I'm not saying that truth doesn't come in the form of medicine, because it certainly can, and I have certainly taken it. I'm just saying that with as much fight as I have in me, I am refusing to live the rest of my life afraid of not seeing eye to eye with everyone. And I'm also not going to allow others to tell me that what I have isn't genuine because I have questions, nor that transformation isn't real because I remain friends with people who don't. I always come back to N.T. Wright's The Challenge of Jesus as one of the most resonant and articulate descriptions of what it means to be a follower of the way, which he describes as to be shot at from both sides. I believe that somehow my having taken the time to write this is going to make today better. I got a lot of friends and a wife who have been an encouragement and support to me throughout the years. And I know that I can sound like a broken record, but I think that, to me, this might be a part of pressing play on side B. We'll see what kinds of essays I'm reading to you 10 years from now. There is a beauty that is telling the truth. And I'm choosing to believe a better story than the one that I started to believe in the hot tub the day that God died. Jesus is not dead. And he's not out to kill you. Or me. You make today better. The true you. The one you're scared to let out. The one God made you to be. The one who just is. Inherently. The one who struggles with the same things that I struggle with. The one who's farther into this messy road that I'm on. You who look at me right now and say, this idiot has no idea what he is in for. And the one who's further behind. Your presence on this earth, objectively, makes today better. Whatever your belief right now, whatever you might believe later, whatever I believe right now, whatever you believe about what I believe right now, whatever I might believe later, whatever your bank numbers, whatever your follower count, whoever you love, whatever you have done or left undone, whatever questions you have, despite what they told you, despite what you tell yourself, if you write for everybody, you write for no one. So this one's for the both of us. It's my why and how I make today better for now. And I hope that in some way, my believing so has made today better for you too. It's all worth living for. This concludes reading time with Levi the Poet. Thanks for hanging out, guys. And for those of you who joined in on the tail end of that, I released that track, essay, part of an EP to everyone at the beginning of quarantine, I guess a month and a half ago. And then about halfway through that time, I don't know what happened, something broke. And I started to get a bunch of emails saying, yeah, none of this works. I can't download anything. I can't stream anything. And so if that's one of you, sorry about that. Well, here we are doing it now. So, yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks. You know, it's different than a poetry performance or something a little more nuanced and such, but hey, it is what it is. So, thanks so much. You guys good? You got any questions or thoughts or anything that I can do to clarify or communicate or help out before we go? Oh, there's Robot Levi. He just popped up. That's nice. Oh, thanks, Ginger and Elijah. And oh, now I'm seeing all of these. I appreciate that. Oh, man. Chanel, this bug bite is awful. It hurts very bad. I had to go to urgent care and spent the day running around town trying to get a prescription for it, which was a huge drag. So I don't know what's going on. Cataracts. Oh, man. Yeah, maybe we can do that at some point in time. I'm going to do a oh, hey, what's up, Imani? Hey, how are you? That's good to see your name on here. Yeah, I'll keep you guys. I mean, I've just enjoyed this, and I think it's a nice thing to do, and I'm going to also be doing some kind of, I don't know, like Well, whatever. I'm not even going to talk about it. When whatever is in my brain is articulate enough to put down on a page, then you'll see it anyway. So, hey, thanks. Seasons read through. That would be great. Oh, it is showing. My 9 showed all throughout this. I mean, I was even thinking about that bit where I talked about, there's a line that is so Enneagram number 9 up in here. The bit about how, the bit about Christians making subject to rather than living peaceably with. I mean, I believe that. But of course I would believe that. I'm a number 9. You gotta live at peace with everybody, guys. Thanks, Dominique. I appreciate that. Thanks, Maria. Hi, Hannah. Hey, John. You bet. It was nice to do. Nice to do. And thanks to those of you who have supported my life, my livelihood through this thing as well. You know, I may end up doing a couple of like shows and do some ticketed kind of things, you know, that'll be a bit more maybe zoomy and interactive and face-to-face, as close to face-to-face can get, but hanging out on here is really nice as well. So, and just your generosity is kind. So thank you for that. The beginning, the separation, man. Yeah, I shared that whole Holy Week series around Easter this last year again, and kind of have some commentary about where some thoughts have changed in relation to where I was at the time of writing them. But they're all up on the IGTV stories if you want to take a look at those. Zek1 US. Zek! Dude, are you Zek from Phoenix? In the Fraction Club? Because I haven't seen your name in a while, if you are. And if you're not, all good. It's nice to see you also here, human being. 9 gang. Anthony, what up? It was written on one piece of paper. You know, the funny thing about It's All Worth Living For, I can't like give too much away right now, but I've used that for so much stuff since then, and at times I've been like, am I just totally overdoing this thing and dragging it into the ground or what? But it so encompasses the umbrella that life seems to be, with all of the good and bad therein. And then I can't get away with it. It just seems like the most succinct way that I can say what I need to say through it. Seth, any more collabs with To Write Love coming? Yeah. Yep. I mean, one of them is a forthcoming podcast with those guys, and I love them. They're great. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Forrest, you bet. Forrest's wife, let Forrest get a sleeve. Let me know if that works. Do you have any advice for writing poetry? Well, one thing I would say is that if you can get out of thinking about rhyming, that would be helpful. I don't think that is a necessity. And more often than not, it just trips me up and I get really stuck, feeling as though it's got to be something that it isn't. But it doesn't have to be anything other than what it is, which is nice, but difficult to remember. I posted an IGTV thing about writer's block. But I think it applies to that question about poetry just as much as anything. I mean, when I'm writing something, I know that my tendency is going to be to err toward trying to write something clever and flowery. But my main goal is going to be to write something invitational, inclusive, and resonant. And oftentimes wordplay and the perfect rhyme doesn't fit into that goal. So that's where the rewrite starts. And oftentimes the rewrite means starting from scratch, which is annoying. David, I would love to do a Christmas tour again. And I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you. I feel like it'd be really weird at this point in time to do a Christmas tour without Dan and Chris. So I'll have to hit those guys up. We'll see. Yeah, I go to Taos sometimes. Josh, nah, but I have read The War of Art. And for anybody watching this stream who wants to read a wonderful book for any sort of creative endeavor, The War of Art is it. It's wonderful. Same with that podcast that I mentioned in here, the You Are a Storyteller. It's by an agent. It's by an agency called Belief Agency, and it's freaking good. It's about storytelling and the impact that narrative has, and they talk about film, and they talk about how to structure things well, and storytelling is so applicable to everything from carrying a 45-minute long essay along to selling a product to writing a poem or whatever. So that's just such a freaking good resource. Oh, thanks, Ginger. What does the N.T. Wright quote you spoke about, to be shot at both sides, mean to you? Huh. Well, it certainly has more significance than this, but I mean, in my own creative journey, I mean, one of the things that we used to joke about back when I was doing a lot of work with Triple X Church was like, it's not even a Triple X Church thing. It's like, oh, it's too raw for this audience, and it's too pushy for this one. Like this sort of, and it can sound too much like martyrdom. It's not a self-pitying kind of thing. That's on the creative end. I think they were just talking about how, in N.T. Wright's example, I think he was talking about how, there were lines in the sand for certain people, and they applied to both the maybe religious leaders of the time, but also to the opposite of that. And he was equally offensive to both parties and never could fit. I remember writing about that book another time. Whenever I put out, I think we talked to, I don't know why this always comes up. I think we talked about it last week on the correspondence stream too, but somebody had mentioned that quote in relation to the blog that I put out for Easter like 4 or 5 years ago, which was called Fuck Death, Happy Resurrection Day. And somebody said, oh, that's an N.T. Wright statement, because it like just made people in my sphere of influence mad that I said that, but also wasn't interesting to anybody who didn't care about Resurrection Sunday. Anyway. Oh, thanks, Sarah. I appreciate your kindness. Thanks, Alexandra. And Sean. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just felt like, because here's the thing, like, I want, a lot of that was dealt with a lot of faith things. There are so many people who are a part of, or have been a part of the stuff that I've done or am doing, who have no interest in those things. And so it's like this balance of like, I want to be able to talk about and communicate what I believe to be true without being off-putting. There's like an inherent offense, I think, to some of it that it just can't be avoided. But it's nice to just be able to articulate the idea that you make today better, regardless of whether you can personally resonate with exactly what I am talking about, or in particular relation to what my journey has been. So I think that now is a great time to be able to remind people that they matter, even when they can't see that many folks who would otherwise be the ones doing that for them. What song or album would you say describes You Make Today better? What do you mean by that, John? Are you talking about like of mine, or just a record in general? Yeah, I love it because it's honest, hate it because it's crude. Maybe that's, Matt, maybe that's it. That's probably what puts the nail on the head for that, and the shot at from both sides statement. And it's applicable all over the place, but that's probably it. Oh, there's Robot Levi. A record in general. You make today better. I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is. I think... Yeah, I don't know. Sorry. Normally, I would talk for 10 minutes until I found it. Yeah, you want to talk about an Enneagram number 9 thing to do. Just start yapping off at the mouth until eventually you get somewhere. It'll be fine. But I don't know. Sorry. Nick, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, that means a lot. I mean, John, to answer your question in relation to stuff that I've put out, Cataracts was sort of the outworking of that, like in between liminal space for me. And so as far as subject matter goes, through some of the stuff that I described in that essay about the things that I had to work through, creatively, Cataracts was the expressive output that came from that. Oh yeah, My Epic is the best dad rock band. There's a band called Dad Legs. I don't know if it gets more dad rock than that, but that's pretty awesome. How do you wrestle with faith and doubt, and who are your influences to get clarity? Whoa. Well, I'll say that I don't think that those two things are opposites the way that I thought that I did or the way that I thought that they were for a long time. I think they're pretty complementary and mutually necessary. I mean, I mentioned, a kind of, I mean, man, I feel like I'm all over the place, and I like hearing different perspectives from all over the place, which is, I used to go on runs and listen to like, I remember for a while there I was going on run. I mean, we're talking totally just like contemporary people who are like popular names right now, which I know is like not the deepest well to pull from or whatever, but I would go on runs and listen to, I'd listen to like a Piper thing and a Rob Bell thing back to back. And that would be like my morning run or whatever. 2 sermons from both of those guys who, created absurd wars with one created the war, the farewell, but I like hearing different perspectives. And sometimes I think that it sucks when I hear, people having, this thing about the God of fences, and there are as many infighters as there are outsiders. Like, I'm not saying that there's not some objectivity to pull from, but I think a lot of times people are saying very similar things and mad at one another because they're not listening enough to understand that that's what's happening. And that's not always the case, but it makes me laugh when it is. Which parts of the essay scared you most? I think, so that one's more easy to answer. I do think that, so I just think that over the years, I have had to learn the difference between what I mentioned of Brene Brown's advice in the very beginning, which is that there's a difference between being vulnerable with an audience and blinding them with with the seeping wound that is still not yet healed enough to function from in a way that promotes clarity and helpfulness as much as it is a self-pitying cry for help. This essay isn't that. Like, I don't think I could have gotten the thing written if I was still in that place, nor do I, and I know that I wouldn't have put it out, because that's what took me so long to put out Cataracts, was the fact that even if all of the content was exactly what it was 6 months before I decided I was ready to release it, before I found Keep Forgiving, I knew it's like, this record is just pissed, and then the point is vengeance. It was only after Keep Forgiving and some of the scarification that happened atop those otherwise bleeding places that I felt like, okay, I mean, the idea that you should be in a healthy, the idea that health is something that needs to be pursued and found to the degree that a person can, as each day there's like an expanding kind of understanding and consciousness. I can't do anything about my own ignorance in the moment. But I think just in general, it was like, I want this, I want things that I put out to be helpful. And I don't want them to be too either self-pitying or self-congratulatory. And I wrestled with that in relation to this for a little while, and eventually decided, no, I think, because I also can't do anything about the way that other people perceive what I'm doing. And that's been a huge lesson that I've had to learn. Like, yeah, I just can't, like, that's where the bits in the essay about codependence come from. It's like, I can't allow extrinsic responses to be the things that dictate what I am going to communicate to the world if and when I decide that it's time to put something out there. Hopefully that answered your question. My favorite podcast to listen to. Somebody asked that last week, and I forget exactly what I said, but I'm just going to stick with the one that I mentioned in the essay and say You Are a Storyteller. It's so phenomenal. Start at the beginning. It's You Are a Storyteller by Belief Agency. And I have learned so much. It's like sitting in a lecture, and you might think that sounds like the most boring stuff ever. But it's great. Like, I have learned so much through that. I've been so encouraged by it. Do you ever battle with the pressure to create something that just won't come out of you? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that I can use Cataracts as the same example. Like, that record, I mean, you know how detrimental it is to a creative person's livelihood to wait 4 years between records? I mean, I'm not saying that, like, it's like somewhat of a joke, but more like, I should say, one, yeah, that's a long, long time, especially when, Drake's dropping 47 long song record. Yeah, whatever. I don't like Drake. This is a bad analogy. The point is, the thought that I'm behind and I'm taking too long. It's such a weird place to be in, the creative kind of mindset, because like, the more kind of tensed up and anxious and behind or pressured or whatever you feel, the less creative you're capable of being. Like, I've really been trying to figure out how to facilitate an openness to, ignoring every notification, ignoring every, and I think that's why, personally, like, why a lot of more like kind of contemplative tradition has appealed to me. It seems to fit well with and complement the like I need to be able to remove myself from that constant feeling of pressure that you're describing, if that answers the question. David Bell, you're a great person. You make today better. Joel, thank you for hanging out and thanks for your kindness. Imani, I have heard bits and pieces of it and bits and pieces of her live stuff. I might be completely mistaken, but I think that she was live on Instagram with that holistic psychologist account, and I saw a bit of that, and if I didn't, then I didn't. I saw one or the other of them. Both of them are doing some pretty neat things, and I think that, between Renee, I don't know the holistic psychologist lady's name, and then Brene, I already said her, and then Hillary Jacobs Hendel has a book called It's Not Always Depression. And I know that a ton of people last week and throughout the week recommended the book. It's when I put that Instagram post with all of the cupping marks all over my back. The book about the body keeps the score. And I still need to read that one. Oh, David, I know who you are. We got to do it again. I got to get back out there. That's the struggle of trying to create a deadline. The creativity is stifled when something is required. Josh, you know what's fascinating about that, though? Is that, and I realize that this is counter what I don't know how to, the thing for me is that a deadline, though, maybe sometimes it's stifling, but I honestly think that the more organized I am, the more creative I'm capable of being, because it's like, this has got to happen. And then I will force myself to make the space to make sure that it does. As opposed to, this can just happen whenever and everything is free flowing and there's no structure whatsoever, which is, I think, where a lot of people feel like they need to be, quote unquote, because of the fear of structure as only a stifling thing exists. But in my experience, there's definitely a healthy balance there between, I mean, I can still make myself like incapable of coming up with anything worth saying by procrastinating the hell out of my life and deciding, I can push this deadline off. It's arbitrary. I created it anyway. Who cares? And then you start to feel like you're going to crawl right on out of your skin, you know? But at times, more and more, I'm trying to be a person who's like creating a sense of punctuality for himself. Ginger, you bet. Oh, yeah, I just read the second part. When there's no structure, nothing happens. Exactly. What's up, Levi? Levi the listener. That's great. Favorite fiction book series? I'll just go with the first. Well, favorite one, I'll stick with what I said last week. Looking for Alaska. Favorite series, though, it's harder to say, but I'm going to go with Stephen King's The Dark Tower series. All you Harry Potter heads out there, The Dark Tower series is my Harry Potter. Freaking amazing. I love it. I don't love the first book, so anybody who's going to go after it, just trust me. Because a friend told me the same thing, and I called him before it ended and said, if this continues like this, I am not going to go on with the book. But it's so good. Alexandra, have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much. Josh, I know what you mean. All right, everybody. I'm happy to stay. I mean, you guys tell me. I'm happy to hang for a little bit longer. I will gladly continue to do this. I don't know if you're bored out of your minds now or what, but as long as some questions keep on coming, I've still got the time for it for a little while longer. But just, you can also feel free to just like get on and say, shut your damn mouth, Levi. We're done. So, general platform for editing, as in write and put it down for a certain amount of time to get space and then come back. Scott, I mean, pad and paper is always sort of the idealistic vision that I have in my mind, but to be completely honest, it rarely happens. I was a huge fan of Evernote for a long time. I used it for probably 12 years, way before I even started anything related to Levi the Poet. In the last 4 or 5 months, my favorite thing, 6 months, I guess, gosh, everything goes by too fast. My friend Alex Sugg told me about Notion. I love Notion. It's kind of a learning curve, but man, there's so much you can do with it. So Notion is kind of the main thing that I'm writing in, both personally, whether that's diary stuff, creative LTP stuff, creative commission stuff for other people who have commissioned me to write things for them. Notion, I believe the website is notion.so. You can also do like calendar and all kinds of things in there. So I want to address Marlena's comment. I think that childhood trauma and emotional health are so important, and I'm so glad that you're talking about them. Honestly, why I want to start doing more spoken word on my channel. Thank you. So thank you. I will say, like, man, I am like, I don't, maybe that is actually another part of the, what was the scariest part to put down is I don't want to paint my, family in a poor light ever. My mom and my sister and I just had an awesome, kind of sit down conversation for an upcoming, documentary that we've been working on to kind of commemorate the 10 years of LTP in relation to the book that I plan to release. And we like tackled it there. I've been nervous about that in times in my life. So let me just say, like, that idea of trauma, I believe, is applicable to everyone across the board, regardless of what your experience is. And therefore, and big or small, I mean, it's not a comparison thing, but therefore, in relation to that, if I can give you a resource to anyone who's still here, I met a couple. My friend introduced me to a couple named Kay and Milan Yurkovic. I wrote an essay about them as well. Maybe I'll share that sometime. It's currently only available to the Fraction Club, but they are a couple who deals exclusively with couples in relation to childhood attachment theory. And I swear to you, discovering that was like some prison doors got opened on up for me. And I cannot speak highly enough about it. And you don't have to be in a relationship in order to benefit from it. Their website is howwelove.com. There's like a little 5-minute test there that you take, and they give you your results. It's not a personality test so much as it, I think, would more properly be described as a thing that's kind of like almost the why behind the what of who a person is. And, and when I say 5 minutes, I mean that literally. And then these things pop up that tell you about yourself, and you read them and you laugh because they're right on. So howwelove.com would be a great resource for folks to check out. Oh, have a good night, John. Thanks for hanging out. What is your favorite piece to perform? It's pretty dependent upon how often I've been performing the thing. I really do love It's All Worth Living For. That piece I did at the end of last week's live stream. And it's fun to do. It was not fun to write. I actually really didn't like it at all when I first wrote it, and I almost scrapped it. And I'm really glad I didn't. I don't know what it was about it, but I just wasn't convinced that it was a thing worth sharing. And yet here we are. There's all kinds of things being written and based off of that piece, which is wild. Brandy's good. We both feel like old people because we're both injured right now. And you can see that on the back of my hand. It is just so freaking gross. Sorry about that. Oh, good. Chanel, you've read it. That's amazing. Do I or have I read Tolkien's books? I have. I've never read the Silmarillion, but I've read all of Lord of the Rings. I did the audiobooks. Some people say that that doesn't count. Actually, I may have done both for those books, but I love a good audiobook any old day. John Standifer. Oh my gosh. It's so good to see your name up there. Holy crap. Hi. Thoughts on writing poetry in different emotions? I mean, yeah, I do it. I like admittedly, I realized over the last year that I kind of got into a pattern of trying to find a specific thing to pull from deep down inside of the depths of all of the sadness that could or might exist somewhere. And if it doesn't, then I need to go make it exist. There's a line in Dear Pianist about driving the country on my own in an attempt to break my heart, or writing a sad song that somebody could relate to, or whatever. I'm really not in that place anymore. I'm really thankful for that. Correspondence was written from a place of like so much health and joy and excitement. Cataracts was written from a place of anger a lot of times and compassion a lot of times. Eventually, with a kind of empathy because of the way that I discovered the mirror. I discovered myself in the mirror of all of my words, you know? There's a bit in the essay that I wrote today about how we're most critical of others, about the things that we see most clearly in them that we don't like in ourselves, and most desiring to give to others what we struggle to receive. And so there's a little bit of both of those things in I think everything that I write, but I'm definitely thankful to be able to write from a place of health. T-shirts. Scott, are you talking about T-shirts? If you're talking about T-shirts, I don't throw T-shirts out a lot. I'll say I'm not particularly sentimental unless it's about certain things. Like every letter that any fan or anybody has ever written me, I have those. And I keep some childhood things. But I kind of really love the idea of minimalism, and I hate clutter. So if I feel like my drawers or whatever is getting cluttered, I'll just get rid of it. Even if it kind of hurts, so that I don't have to think about it anymore and it doesn't have to bother me. But also, I love holding on to tees for t-shirt quilts? T-shirt blankets. Brandy made me such a sick t-shirt blanket for my birthday one year. It had like all my old like band shirts and some LTP stuff that we had left over, but also like Eminem and probably Creed or something. So that's what I do with shirts. Dean, long-time listener, first-time caller. Some of your poems have instrumentals in them. Do you find that you write your poems first and then instrumentals over? Yes, the first one. And actually, I don't write the instrumentals. I've got some really good friends who are far more talented than I am, and by that I mean 100% more talented than I am as musicians, because I am not one. And so it's pretty wild to me that they can do that so well, but I end up sort of writing the piece and then giving it to them to compliment based upon however that might make them feel. Thanks for saying that about Kaleidoscope, Dominique. Oh, a correspondence commentary live stream. Maybe. We'll see. That might be kind of fun. Well, here's the thing. Here's a real thing. I'm gonna just keep talking about it because it's important to me, and also I've got to fund it and let people know that it's happening, and that'll include pre-orders and releasing all kinds of content to support it. But the book that is coming, we did a ton of track-by-track commentary in a similar vein as correspondence. We even did more track-by-track stuff for correspondence that wasn't pulled from the commentary, so as to like kind of promote and have some stuff to release it alongside that campaign. And so more and more of that type of stuff will come out. I don't know if it'll be happening live or not, but it is a thing that is forthcoming. So Josh, you got it. You got it. I will go so far as to give to do this. Everybody on here, I will trade you a book for some dollars. It'll be great. It'll be great. It's like the barter system, except with money, and exactly the same way as any sort of purchase works. It'll be fantastic. I'm excited about it. So. Yeah. Alrighty, O'Reilly, I will. And frankly, I think that some of what we've got ready for this book campaign will scratch that itch for you, I think. Well, good. I'm glad. I want the response to be that you want it, not that you don't want it. So, well, I think I'll call it. It's been really nice, guys. And I didn't know how this would go, but, thanks for hanging out, chatting for a while. I hope that it's something that is nice to be able to be doing together, separately together. And it's certainly an honor to have anybody hop on, continue to pay attention to the work that I'm trying to do through LTP. And I appreciate you for hanging out. I believe that Robot Levi has already told you all of the things that I need to tell you about. So if you've been paying any attention to Robot Levi, you can do what you feel so inclined to do, which includes nothing. There's no obligation for hopping onto this thing. No, it does not have to be reciprocal in any way. David, as far as the LTP podcast, I stick my foot in my mouth by saying things I shouldn't too soon, but I do have a kind of idea to start, even if it's an informal thing, that is in relation to this idea of telling ourselves better stories and helping one another live better stories. And this actually was going to be a part of that. I just decided to go for it as its own thing. But at any rate, that's that. So, Zek, an audio version. Well, there kind of exists an audio version, as the book is largely an accumulation of content and art and things that I've created over the course of the last decade. It's sort of like a commemorative coffee table art book. It's like a full color poetry with commentary, with photography, with illustration, with like process pieces, with, there's so much stuff in it, and I'm super excited about it. So sort of, I think I'll probably, there will at least be some interactive stuff that comes out in conjunction with it that will include forms of audio for you to have. So that's that. All right, guys. Well, let's call it. I appreciate you. If you want to share this or know of anybody who might enjoy listening to at least the essay, if not the banter, then go for it. It'll be live on here for a while, and I hope that you have a wonderful weekend. Please continue to be safe human beings who are making today better. All right. Appreciate you.